lead a developer in Evernote for all the SDKs. So I'll be giving you an overview of the API first, and then we'll get into some of the SDKs. I'll show you some code, some Python code, and we'll try to write an iOS app in 15 minutes with an Evernote integration, just to show you how to use the Evernote API and things like that. So first, I wanted to explain like the concepts that the Evernote API works off of. So we'll talk about a couple of things first. So what is Evernote? It started off as a note-taking solution, but it's really much more than that now. It's the best way to describe it is it's like your external brain where you store things you want to remember. So that's why we have things to Evernote Hello is to remember people. We have an app to remember the food you ate, Evernote Food, and we have the Evernote Clipper, which lets you remember things you've seen on the web, things like that. So it's evoluted into a much larger thing now, and it makes it easier to search for things as well. So the Evernote search will let you search through PDFs, search through Office documents, search through images, doing OCR. So if you clip an image and you have a map full of cities, and if you search for Bogota, it will show up in the search. So the search is really powerful. We have search suggestions, just like Google search. So someone recently described Evernote as the Google, but for your personal data. So that was a really nice way of describing it, I think. So that's what Evernote has become. It's basically a Google for all your things personal, and it's not social at all. So I wanted to talk about the Evernote architecture. One reason is maybe it's interesting for you to know about this. Second reason is that it makes it easier to use the API if you know about this. You heard about the dev cup, so this gives you kind of a nice kickstart to if you want to make a nice integration. So there are two endpoints that you can think of. There's a note store and a user store. That's all you need to worry about. These are the two endpoints you need to hit to make API calls. So you'll either make API calls to the note store or to the user store. There's this thing called thrift. I'll talk about that a little bit. But the good thing is it'll all sound complicated and complex to those of you who've not heard of thrift before. But the good news is that you don't need to worry about thrift when you're using the Evernote API. It's all hidden in the SDKs, so you don't need to worry about that. So what's Note Store? Note Store is everything to do with, you might have guessed it, notes. So your note resources. When you use the Find Notes API or creating a note, you use the Note Store endpoint. User Store is for authenticating and getting the user information like email address and things like that. So as you can see, there are like multiple note stores. So the note store is built to scale at Evernote. So at each note store serves X number of users. So for any user, you will need to know which note store you need to hit in order to get the information. Where do you get that from? You get that from the user store. So you authenticate using the user store, and the user store will tell you which note store you need to connect to in order to run your APIs. Again, all of this is fairly hidden in the SDKs. Like you don't need to like go deep into this and know like the underlying architecture, but it's useful to have this background when you're using the Evernote API, because you'll see these terms note store and user store all over the API. So it's useful to know what they stand for and how the architecture is laid out. Feel free to interrupt me, by the way. If you have any questions, just shout it out. So thrift, what's thrift? It's basically an interface definition language. So you give it some bindings. So you give it your objects, and then it'll do the marshalling, unmarshalling for you, and create code for different languages based on those definitions. So it has code generators. So it'll create code for Objective-C, for C++, for Java, for Go, if you've heard of Go programming language by Google, for JavaScript. So there are multiple code generators. Evernote has written some of those code generators. We've written the Objective-C one. I've contributed a little to the Objective-C code generator. It's the project is not owned by Evernote. It's an open source Apache project, and there are a lot of contributors to it. But the Objective-C one was written by Evernote because we wanted a native iOS client. So the way Thrift works is it's a binary protocol, which is why Evernote does not have a REST API. So all the data over the wire is all binary. There's no JSON involved, and the client sends binary data. It doesn't send any JSON. So if there's 1 MB of data I want to send over the wire, there's no overhead. There's 1 MB that will go over the wire. The other formats sometimes have some overhead. So why did Evernote choose Thrift? One example is platform independence, so we can generate code for different languages. Other one is backward compatibility. Thrift handles backward compatibility really well. So when we change our API, it doesn't break any clients. It's completely 100% backward compatible. And that was an important design decision for Evernote because it's really important, since we have so many different clients. It's important not to break any of them when we release a new API or add a new feature or anything of that sort. So that's why Thrift works really well for us. It doesn't work well for everyone, but in Evernote's case, it's a great choice. Yeah. So good thing is, if that sounded complicated, you don't need to worry about Thrift. All you need to know is Node Store is the endpoint for notes, and user store is for authentication. It's backward. Okay. All right. What is this gigantic diagram? So I wanted to get into some more details, and this is the object model of the Evernote database. So if you want to know exactly how the database is laid out and what you're trying to change using the API or what you're trying to retrieve using the API, this is the diagram that will help you. This is not posted anywhere. This is sorry.
Is this a basic model or is a definite model for the database who Evernote uses?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Is this a basic database or is a definitive database that Evernote uses for getting the API?
So this is the data model on the server side.
Okay.
Yeah, and obviously this changes over time, but this is the basic structure of the database. We use SQLite on the database side, and this is the object model. We don't really publicize this. This is just for you guys to know, so that you know the details. But this is not there on our dev website. I just made this in the morning today to just show you guys how it's laid out. So you can see the double arrows means many, and so one-to-many relationships, your general UML diagram. So a notebook can have many notes. Those are the properties of the notes. There are multiple properties in a note. A note can have multiple tags. A tag can be connected to multiple notes. So it's really, it helps to like picturize what Evernote is like. It's a note which can be linked to a notebook, and a note can also have many resources. A resource can be a PDF file, an audio file, anything, any binary data. You can put anything and just specify what MIME type it is, basically. So it supports anything, and that's been the model of Evernote. It's one of the most flexible cloud storage companies because it doesn't restrict you to a file or a particular format. It's very flexible, and which is why it's a great platform for apps, because a lot of interesting apps come out of the flexibility, because there is room to do so much. You can do project management, or you can store images and organize your house. I mean, I've seen people take pictures of their wardrobe and then tag them, and then if they want to wear something, they'll just search in Evernote and that note will show up. So there are a lot of interesting use cases. Another one was there's a bookshelf, and you take a picture of the bookshelf, and Evernote has OCR, so it will search through the images to see the author name. So if you feel like reading a certain author, you just type in the author name and it will search the book for you. So a lot of interesting use cases that are possible. So that was the data model. We'll be setting a lot of these properties and creating a lot of these objects later when I show you some code. But this just helps to see. So how do you authenticate? I talked a little bit about the user store and that you need to do authentication. How do you authenticate to an Evernote to the Evernote service? For all third-party apps, what we use is the standard procedure, OAuth, which is used by almost all API providers. We use OAuth 1.0a. It's just like 1.0 with some security additions. And this is the OAuth protocol. This is standard. This is not defined by Evernote. It's an internet standard. It's basically you have a key and a secret, and that's how you sign some data, and the server has the same secret and will identify you based on that secret, and give you an authentication token, which will be valid for a year unless the user revokes it. But otherwise, you're good to use that token for a year. So OAuth, if that sounds daunting to you, our SDKs encapsulate all that. So all you have to do in most of our SDKs is just call authenticate, and it will do the OAuth for you. You just give it the consumer key and secret. It will do the OAuth and get you the authentication token, which you can use to connect to the node store. If he's not an Evernote user, he'll have to go outside the app and do register for Evernote, because it'll just ask him for username, password. If he doesn't have that, then he'll have to go outside the app and register. That's because of iOS. On iOS, that's the case because Apple is not happy with people trying to push registration in a web view, because they want to control because you might end up buying a premium account and they want to control revenue because it should go through Apple, because they take a 30% cut. So they don't let us do that. So you can't create an account. But on the web, yeah, you can. On the web, if you're writing a web app and you authenticate and user does not have a password, he can create an account and get a password. So depends on platform to platform. So again, it's a cloud API. You connect directly to the Evernote service. There's nothing in between. We don't use AWS. We don't use anything else. Everything is hosted by us. We have all the servers. Evernote really wants to guarantee that we have complete control of your. We don't want to use your data to advertise anything. Evernote never mines any of your data outside of your notebook. So it's never been a social app. It's never been, your data will never be used for advertisements. So you directly connect to that node store, get data out of it. There is nothing in between that happens. And the same API is used by internal Evernote apps as well. So it's the exact same API. We literally take the Java docs from that API and publish it out to you guys. So there's no difference. Evernote for iOS uses the same API. Evernote Food uses the same API. The Clipper uses the same API. Those of you who've heard of Penultimate, it's a handwriting app that saves to Evernote, that uses the same API as well. So we use the same API, so you have all the power to do whatever you want with the notes and with the notebooks. You can pull data out of it, push data into it, anything. So how do you get started? So you need, for the OAuth, you need an API key and secret. So that's the first step. You go to our homepage, there's a green, sorry. So there's a green button on top which creates a consumer key and secret for you that you can use for OAuth. Next step is to download the SDK. Depends on what you're trying to do. Based on that, we have about 10 SDKs or more than that probably for all the popular platforms. So you download the SDK. We have a separate environment for testing, which is called sandbox.evernote.com. So you can create an account there. The consumer key and secret will work only for Sandbox until you do step 4. But it's always a good practice to first run your app against a Sandbox account so that you don't mess up your own notes. You can try the different APIs. It's just a good way to test your app out. And once you're ready with the app, you can activate the key on production. You just send us a request. At that point, we do check each request coming in. So a human sitting somewhere checks each request. When you get an API key, we don't. We just give the API key. But for production, we check it because we don't want you to be using an application name which says Evernote. That's the only thing. We just check for that. And if you want to delete notes, we ask you why you want to delete it, and if you have a good enough reason, it's fine. Otherwise, we generally don't give permissions to delete notes because we feel that only an Evernote client should be able to do that. But there are clients which have needed that, and we're happy to give it if needed. You just need to have a reason. It's just more about a user feeling comfortable authorizing into your app. Like, if he's authorizing to delete notes, he might get scared and run away. So why do you want to unnecessarily do that? So let's talk about how the document is modeled in Evernote. So it's really, like I said, it's really a flexible model. It's based on HTML. It's based on XHTML. Sorry, it's a subset of XHTML. So it has almost all the XHTML tags and some Evernote tags. So when you render ENML in the sense that if you want to show the note to someone, you'll generally convert it to HTML and show it in some kind of a web view. There are other ways to show it. You could render it however you want to, but that's the general way to do it because it's XHTML. The Evernote tags are EN Media. There are a few others. EN Note is the root tag, and then all the other XHTML tags will work. Style tags will work, so you can style your notes. So it's really unstructured data in the note. You can put whatever you want. You can attach resources. You can embed images. You can put audio. You can put PDFs. Anything can go. Even if it's an attachment that doesn't have a MIME type, you just want to put some binary data, you can do that as well. Some apps do that to store application data. So yeah, it's just XML. So XML is structured, but there's a lot of flexibility to change things around that. So that's ENML. It's called Evernote Markup Language. It's very well documented on a dev website, so you shouldn't have any trouble with that. So if you want to get in touch with us if something's not working, there are a bunch of ways, and Evernote is really responsive to all of these. I'm on most of these as well. I'm on the forums. I check them every day, and we have a very good response rate. There are 4 of us who check the forums. So the good thing about posting to the forums is that there are a lot of other Evernote developers there as well, so they answer questions as well. And we have a lot of evangelists who just want to contribute to the Evernote platform, who answer questions there as well. We have a mailing list which goes out very infrequently, but it gives you good updates about the API if there's something new. Twitter account is always good to follow, as well as if you have a problem, you can just tweet to Evernote_dev. Chris handles that, and if he sees a problem with the API, he just reaches out to me, or he answers it himself. And we have a blog. It's blog.evernote.com/tech. It's a really good resource to follow. It has I write some blogs there as well. It gives updates on our SDKs. It provides updates on our APIs. We explain it really well in the blog, and it also gives an inside look of how things are implemented inside of Evernote. So that's a really good resource as well.